A veteran chose one of 3 German shepherds. The other 2 burst into tears, terrified at the prospect of their family being torn apart. What could make the other 2 react so strongly to that choice? And what might their bond reveal when separation suddenly feels possible? Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about loyalty, family, and the extraordinary connection between people and animals, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you sincerely for spending your time with us and for continuing to support this community. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Your messages remind us how far these stories travel. Now let us begin the story. Sometimes the hardest choice is the one that looks simplest from the other side of the gate. Ethan Walker does not come to Pine Ridge Animal Rescue looking for a miracle. He comes on a cold November afternoon with one leash folded inside his coat pocket and one rule he has repeated to himself for nearly 40 miles. One dog. That is what his house can handle. That is what his budget can support. That is what his carefully ordered life has room for. The gravel beneath his boots is damp from morning rain, and the air carries the clean smell of pine mixed with disinfectant from the kennel building. Ethan pauses outside the entrance when barking rises from somewhere behind the walls. For 12 years, noise had been part of his life. Engines, radios, boots on concrete, commands spoken before sunrise. Since leaving military service, silence has become easier. Silence never asks him to say goodbye. A shelter employee named Claire leads him past several kennels before stopping beside a fenced exercise yard. These 3 came in together, she says. Ethan looks through the gate. 3 German shepherds stand beneath a bare maple tree. The largest is a broad male with dark markings across his back and gray beginning around his muzzle. Ranger, Claire says. Beside him stands Sadie, leaner, with alert brown eyes that seem to notice everything at once. The youngest, Finn, stays half a step behind her. His ears are upright, but his body remains cautious. Ethan crouches near the fence. Ranger watches him without barking. Sadie glances toward Ethan, then immediately checks Finn. Finn looks at Ranger. Ranger looks back at both of them. The exchange lasts only seconds. Ethan notices anyway. They always do that, he asks. Claire follows his gaze. Do what? Count each other. Claire becomes quiet. Ethan enters the yard slowly. He does not call the dogs. He stands with his hands relaxed at his sides and lets them decide what happens next. Ranger approaches first. 10 feet. 6. 3. He stops close enough to smell Ethan's jacket. Ethan waits. Ranger finally touches his nose to Ethan's knuckles. Hello, old man, Ethan says softly. Ranger's tail moves once. Sadie approaches next, but after 2 steps, she turns to check Finn. Finn has remained beneath the tree. Sadie returns to him, touches her muzzle briefly against his cheek, then looks toward Ethan again. Something tightens in Ethan's chest. He has seen that kind of checking before. Not fear exactly. Something closer to responsibility. Claire opens another gate leading to a larger exercise run. You can spend time with each of them separately if you want. Ethan nods, but before anyone moves, Ranger walks toward the open gate. He crosses halfway through. Sadie immediately stops exploring. Finn rises. Ranger freezes. He looks over his shoulder. Only when he sees both dogs standing together does he continue another few feet. Ethan watches without speaking. Claire closes neither gate. Interesting, Ethan murmurs. Ranger circles back toward him and sits. His posture is calm, almost formal. Ethan lowers one hand. Ranger leans forward until the side of his head rests beneath Ethan's palm. The contact is quiet. No excitement. No demand. Just weight and warmth. Ethan feels something inside him shift. You make a strong argument, he whispers. Ranger closes his eyes for 1 second. Across the yard, Sadie is watching. Finn is watching too. Ethan looks from Ranger to the other 2 shepherds, then back again. He came here believing the difficult part would be deciding which dog belonged with him. Standing in that cold yard, Ethan begins to suspect he has misunderstood the choice completely. By the time the afternoon light begins turning gold behind the pine trees, Ethan knows which dog keeps pulling his attention back. Ranger does not perform for him. He does not jump or paw at the fence. He simply stays close, moving with the quiet patience of an animal that has learned not to expect too much from strangers. Ethan walks the perimeter of the exercise yard with him, listening to the soft rhythm of paws over damp leaves. Every few yards, Ranger glances up. Not for praise, not for permission, just checking. Ethan recognizes that habit. He used to do something similar with the Marines beside him, making sure everyone was still there without ever saying the words. Claire gives Ethan time alone with Sadie next. She is gentle but restless. She accepts a touch beneath her chin, then turns immediately toward the adjoining yard, where Ranger and Finn wait. Her ears lift at the faint jingle of Ranger's collar tag. "You know where he is?" Ethan murmurs. Sadie looks at him, then toward the gate again. Finn is different. When Ethan enters his run, the younger shepherd keeps several feet between them. Ethan does not close the distance. He sits on a wooden bench and watches his own breath appear in the cold air. Minutes pass. Finn finally approaches, careful and silent, but stops when Ranger moves beyond his view. Finn turns so quickly that Ethan notices. Ranger reappears near the fence. Only then does Finn relax. Later, inside the adoption office, a small electric heater hums beneath the window. Claire places 3 folders on the desk. Ethan looks at them, then at the single leash still folded beside his chair. "I came for one," he says. "I know," Claire replies. There is no pressure in her voice. Ethan rubs his thumb along the worn edge of the leash. His house has one spare dog bed waiting beside the fireplace, one food station, one place cleared in the back seat of his truck. One dog fits the plan. He looks through the office window. Ranger is sitting near the gate. Sadie lies several feet behind him. Finn rests beside her. "Ranger," Ethan says. Quietly. Claire studies him. "You are sure?" Ethan takes a long breath. "As sure as I can be after one afternoon." Claire nods and reaches for Ranger's paperwork. The decision should bring relief. Instead, Ethan feels an unexpected heaviness settle beneath his ribs. Outside, Ranger rises as Claire approaches with a leash. He allows her to clip it to his collar without resistance. Sadie stands immediately. Finn follows. Claire opens the inner gate and leads Ranger toward the office entrance. Ranger takes 4 steps, then 5. His collar tag makes a small metallic sound with each movement. Ethan opens the door and steps outside. "Come on, buddy," he says softly. Ranger looks at him. For a moment, Ethan thinks the dog will cross the yard and stand beside him. Ranger takes one more step. Behind him comes a thin, trembling whimper. "Sadie." Ethan does not move. Finn presses close against her shoulder. Sadie's eyes remain fixed on Ranger. Ranger's ears shift backward. Claire gives the leash the slightest invitation forward. "It is okay," she whispers. Ranger does not follow. He turns his head. Sadie makes the sound again, quieter this time. Finn stands perfectly still beside her. Ranger looks back at Ethan, then toward the 2 shepherds behind the gate. His body remains between both directions. Ethan feels the folded leash in his pocket, suddenly heavier than it has any right to be. He had spent the afternoon deciding which dog he wanted to take home. Ranger, it seems, is facing a very different decision. Ranger remains motionless long enough for the cold to become noticeable again. A breeze moves through the bare branches above the yard, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine across the fence. Ethan watches the old shepherd without touching him. The leash hangs loose from Claire's hand. Nothing is forcing Ranger forward, yet something is clearly holding him back. Sadie stands behind the gate with her chest pressed close to the wire. Finn stays against her side. Another small whimper escapes Sadie, and Ranger's ears turn toward the sound. "Do not pull him," Ethan says quietly. Claire nods. "I was not going to." Ethan steps closer and lowers himself until he is nearly level with Ranger's eyes. "You know where I am, buddy." Ranger looks at him. For one brief second, his expression softens. Then he turns towards Sadie and Finn again. Ethan has spent enough years around working dogs to understand the danger of putting human explanations onto every movement. Dogs do not speak in sentences. They do not explain grief. But they communicate constantly if someone is patient enough to notice. Ranger is noticing everything. Ethan rises and walks toward the gate. Sadie's tail lowers as he approaches. Finn takes one step backward, then stops when Sadie remains where she is. "Can we open this?" Ethan asks. Claire hesitates. "Yes, but let us give them space." She releases Ranger's leash from her hand while leaving it clipped to his collar, then opens the gate. Ranger does not rush through. He walks. Slowly. Deliberately. The moment he crosses the threshold, Sadie reaches him. She presses her muzzle beneath his chin, then moves along his shoulder as if checking that every part of him has returned. Finn circles once before touching his nose to Ranger's cheek. Ranger stands between them. Come again. His breathing changes. Ethan hears it from several feet away. Slower. Claire folds her arms against the cold. I have seen bonded dogs, she says. This feels different. Ethan watches Finn settle beside Ranger's front leg. How long have they been together? Claire looks toward the office. I know they arrived together. I would rather check the records before I tell you anything else. Ethan appreciates the answer. No guesses. No convenient story. Just what she knows. He looks down at the leash trailing beside Ranger. 5 minutes earlier, that leash represented a new beginning. Now it looks like a line someone had drawn through the middle of something Ethan does not yet understand. Ranger suddenly turns toward him. The shepherd walks away from Sadie and Finn and stops directly in front of Ethan. He touches Ethan's hand with his nose. Then he looks back at the other two. Once. Twice. Ethan feels his throat tighten. You are making this complicated, he whispers. Ranger sits. Sadie remains near the gate. Finn leans against her. Ethan kneels and rests one hand lightly against Ranger's neck. What are you asking me to do? The dog cannot answer. He does not need to. Claire returns to the office and comes back carrying a thick folder with several papers tucked unevenly inside. A faded photograph slips partly from the edge as she walks. Ethan catches only a glimpse before she pushes it back into place. 3 German shepherds are lying together on a wooden porch. Younger. Healthier. Unmistakably the same 3 dogs. Ethan slowly stands. That picture, he says. Claire looks down at the folder, then back at Ranger, Sadie, and Finn. Her expression changes. Ethan, she says softly, I think you need to see what is in here before you take anyone home. Inside the adoption office, the heater hums beneath the window while Claire places the folder between them. Ranger lies near Ethan's chair, but his body faces the glass door overlooking the yard. Beyond it, Sadie and Finn remain together beneath the fading November light. Ethan notices Ranger checking them every few seconds. Claire removes the photograph first. The image is worn at the corners. Ranger, Sadie, and Finn are stretched across a wooden porch in summer sunlight. Their coats brighter, their faces younger. Ranger lies in the middle. Sadie's head rests across his back. Finn is curled against Ranger's front legs. Same family. Ethan asks. Claire nods. For years. She turns several pages carefully. Their previous owner had been an older widower named Walter who lived outside town. According to the intake notes, declining health eventually made caring for 3 large dogs impossible. A relative helped surrender them together, with one request written across the paperwork in blue ink. Please keep them together if possible. Ethan reads the sentence twice. If possible, he says quietly. Claire looks toward the yard. Shelters hear that more often than you might think. Sometimes we can honor it. Sometimes circumstances make it difficult. There is no defensiveness in her voice. Just reality. 3 German shepherds require space, food, medical care, exercise, and an adopter prepared for a commitment most families cannot make. Ethan understands that. Understanding does not make the photograph easier to look at. Claire continues through the records. Ranger is approximately 8. Sadie is 6. Finn is 4. Their veterinary histories are ordinary for their ages. Then Claire stops at a page marked with a yellow tab. This explains some of what you saw. Finn had once been separated from Ranger and Sadie for several days during treatment for a stomach illness. The staff noted that he became withdrawn and ate poorly until he could see the other dogs again. After reunion, his appetite gradually returned. Ethan looks through the window. Finn is standing now, nose close to the glass. Ranger immediately lifts his head. So this is not just today. No, Claire says. It is not. Another note describes Sadie becoming restless whenever Ranger was taken alone for routine examinations. Ranger, meanwhile, consistently waited near doors until the others returned. None of it proves that separation would permanently harm them. Claire is careful to say that. But together, the notes form a pattern Ethan cannot ignore. He looks down at Ranger. You have been keeping count for a long time. Ranger's ears move at the sound of his voice. Ethan reaches toward the leash clipped to Ranger's collar, then stops. A memory rises without invitation. Years earlier, after his final deployment, Ethan had stood in an airport watching families search the arriving crowd. Everyone was counting. One husband, one daughter, one friend, one familiar face emerging through the doorway. He remembers understanding, perhaps for the first time, that coming home means little if the person you are searching for does not come through with you. He pushes the memory aside and returns to the folder. Has anyone tried adopting all three? Claire shakes her head. There have been inquiries. Most people decide one is manageable. A few considered two. Nobody completed an application for all three. Ethan leans back. Outside, Sadie presses closer to Finn as darkness gathers around the yard. Ranger stands and walks to the glass. His nose nearly touches the window. Finn mirrors him from the other side. For several seconds, the two dogs remain separated by less than an inch of glass. Ethan reaches into his coat and removes the leash he brought from home. One leash, one bed, one carefully measured plan. He places it on the desk beside the photograph. Claire says nothing. Ethan studies the three shepherds, then looks at Ranger's adoption papers waiting for his signature. The question is no longer whether Ranger could belong in Ethan's home. The question is whether Ethan can live with becoming the reason Ranger leaves his family behind. Ethan does not sign the papers. Instead, he asks Claire for 10 minutes alone with the decision. She leaves the folder on the desk and steps into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her. The heater continues its steady hum. Outside, night has nearly settled over Pine Ridge, turning the windows into dark mirrors broken by the pale lights above the kennels. Ranger remains beside the glass, watching Sadie and Finn. Ethan studies him from across the room. One dog, he says quietly. Ranger turns one ear toward him. That was the plan. Ethan almost smiles, but the feeling disappears before it reaches his face. Plans have always made sense to him. They give uncertainty a shape. His small house sits on 2 acres beyond the edge of town, with a fenced backyard and an old red barn he uses mostly for storage. There is enough room for one German shepherd to run comfortably. 3 would change everything. Food costs would triple. Veterinary bills could arrive without warning. His mornings would begin earlier. His truck would need a barrier behind the front seats. The spare dog bed beside the fireplace would become almost useless. Ethan takes out his phone and opens his banking application. He studies the numbers carefully. His military retirement income is steady, and the repair work he does for neighbors brings in extra money, but responsibility cannot be built on emotion alone. He calculates food, routine veterinary care, medications, supplies, and emergencies. The answer is uncomfortable, not impossible. Ranger leaves the window and walks toward him. Ethan rests his palm against the shepherd's shoulder. You do not know what you are asking. Ranger lowers himself beside Ethan's boots. Through the glass, Finn begins pacing near the gate. Sadie follows him for several steps, then stops and looks toward the office. Ranger immediately raises his head. Ethan notices. Again, always counting. Claire returns when Ethan opens the door. Can I see the yard with all 3 one more time? He asks. Minutes later, the dogs are together beneath the lights. Ethan stands near the fence while Ranger walks directly to Sadie and Finn. The change is subtle but unmistakable. Finn stops pacing. Sadie's shoulders loosen. Ranger sniffs both of them, then settles near Ethan. Claire watches quietly. What happens if I take Ranger tonight? Ethan asks. Sadie and Finn stay together unless an adoption plan changes, she says. And Ranger? He goes home with you. The words sound simple. Ethan looks at the 3 shepherds. Ranger sits closest to him. Sadie sits beside Ranger. Finn presses against Sadie's other side. A straight line of warm bodies in the cold. Ethan reaches into his pocket and feels his truck keys. He could leave with Ranger before dinner. He could keep the promise he made to himself. One dog. One manageable change. But another thought has begun troubling him. What happens if someone wants Sadie tomorrow, but not Finn? Claire's expression answers before her voice does. We evaluate every adoption carefully, but we cannot guarantee they will remain together forever. Ethan looks at Finn. The young shepherd is watching Ranger with complete attention. So choosing one today might only be the first separation. Claire nods. Ethan walks slowly toward the gate. Ranger follows. Sadie follows Ranger. Finn follows Sadie. For figures moving together without command. Ethan stops. So do all 3 dogs. For the first time that afternoon, he understands why the choice feels wrong. He has been asking which shepherd belongs with him. Perhaps the better question is what kind of home these 3 already believe they belong to. Ethan turns toward Claire. Do not process Ranger's adoption tonight. Claire studies his face. Are you changing your mind? Ethan looks back at the dogs. I think I finally am. Claire does not ask what Ethan means. She simply looks at the 3 German shepherds standing beside him beneath the kennel lights, then unlocks the office door again. Come inside, she says. Ethan follows, leaving Ranger, Sadie, and Finn together in the yard. This time, when Ranger watches him leave, he does not appear torn. Sadie is beside him. Finn is beside Sadie. Everyone is accounted for. Claire sits behind the desk while Ethan remains standing. If I wanted to apply for all 3, he says, what would you need from me? Claire blinks once. You came here for 1 dog. I remember. 3 shepherds are not 3 times the responsibility. Some days, they can feel like 6. Ethan almost smiles. That sounds familiar. Claire pulls out a different application. She explains that Pine Ridge will need to confirm his property allows 3 large dogs, review veterinary plans, discuss expenses, and arrange a home visit. Ethan listens carefully. He does not interrupt. This is not a rescue fantasy. Love does not pay veterinary bills or repair fencing. Good intentions do not replace preparation. My backyard is fenced, he says. About half an acre. The rest of the property is 2 acres total. There is an old barn, but they would live inside the house. Claire writes notes. Other pets. No children. No work schedule. Mostly repair jobs. I choose my hours. She looks up. Emergency support? Ethan pauses. That question lands differently. For years, he has arranged his life so nobody depends on him. His closest neighbor, Daniel, lives less than a mile away and has offered help more times than Ethan has accepted it. I have someone I can ask, Ethan says. Claire nods. Then ask before you promise anything. Ethan respects that too. 40 minutes later, he drives home alone. The empty passenger seat feels wrong, but not regrettable. Rain begins tapping against the windshield as he turns onto the county road. At his house, he does not remove his coat. He walks straight through the kitchen and opens the back door. The yard is dark beneath the porch light. He follows the fence line with a flashlight, testing every post and latch. Near the far corner, one section shifts beneath his hand. Not good enough, he murmurs. By 8:00, Daniel's pickup truck is parked beside the barn. Daniel steps out carrying a toolbox and studies Ethan's expression. You adopting a dog or rebuilding a fort? Possibly 3 dogs. Daniel stops. 3. They are family. Daniel looks at him for several seconds, then picks up a drill. Show me the bad fence. They work under portable lights while the temperature falls toward 40 degrees. They reinforce the loose section, check the gate, and measure space inside Ethan's mudroom for food storage. Daniel asks practical questions. Ethan gives practical answers. Near 10, they stand on the porch drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. You sure? Daniel asks. Ethan looks through the living room window at the single dog bed beside the fireplace. No, he says, but I am sure separating them because it is easier for me would stay with me longer than the extra work. Daniel nods toward the house. Then you need 2 more beds. Ethan lets out a quiet laugh, his first real one all day. Before going inside, he checks his phone. A message from Claire waits on the screen. Home visit tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Ethan reads it twice. Then another message appears beneath it. A family has asked about Sadie. Ethan's smile disappears. Tomorrow suddenly feels much farther away. The message from Claire changes the feeling of the entire morning. Ethan sits at his kitchen table before sunrise, the phone resting beside his coffee cup. Outside, the world is still quiet. A thin layer of frost covers the grass, and the porch light reflects against the windows like a small circle of warmth in the darkness. The message from Claire remains open on the screen. A family has asked about Sadie. Ethan knows that shelters cannot hold every decision forever. He knows every dog deserves a chance. But he also knows 3 German shepherds have spent years learning how to stand together. At 10 o'clock, Claire arrives for the home visit. She steps out of her vehicle with a clipboard and a careful expression. Ethan walks her around the property, showing her the reinforced fence, the updated gate, the barn space, and the areas he prepared inside the house. He does not exaggerate. He does not promise perfection. He simply shows the work. You understand this is not just about having enough room, Claire says. Ethan nods. It is about whether they feel safe here. Inside, she notices the changes. 3 food stations sit neatly along the kitchen wall. 3 beds are placed near the fireplace. A small shelf holds supplies, medications, brushes, and toys. The house looks different. Not crowded. Not chaotic. Just prepared. Claire walks slowly through the rooms. You did all this overnight? Most of it, Ethan says. A friend helped. She smiles slightly. The friend who told you that 3 dogs would require 2 more beds. Ethan looks surprised. How did you know? Daniel called to confirm he could help with transportation if needed. Ethan looks down. Daniel had not mentioned that. Another quiet act of support from someone who understood him better than he admitted. After the inspection, Claire sits on the porch with Ethan. The morning air is cold, but the sunlight is beginning to soften. I need to ask you something, she says. Why them? Ethan looks toward the empty yard. At first, I thought I saw one dog that needed a home. He pauses. Then I realized they already had one another. The question was whether I could become part of that without taking something away. Claire listens carefully. Most people would choose the easiest path. Ethan looks at his hands. I have spent a lot of years choosing what was practical. Sometimes practical is necessary, but sometimes it is just another word for avoiding something difficult. Before Claire answers, Ethan's phone vibrates. Another message from the shelter. The family interested in Sadie wants to meet her that afternoon. Ethan reads the words silently. Claire sees his expression change. You cannot control every outcome, she says gently. I know. And you cannot guarantee they will never face another difficult moment. Ethan nods. I know that too. He looks toward the road leading back to town. For a second, he imagines Sadie leaving with someone else. He imagines Ranger waiting by the door. Finn searching the yard. The picture feels heavy. Not because he believes he owns them. Because he understands now that their bond existed before he arrived. Claire gathers her papers. There is still a process. We need final approval. We need to discuss ongoing care. But Ethan, I will tell you something. He looks at her. No one has ever spent this much time preparing before even meeting the adoption requirements. Ethan gives a small smile. I was not preparing for 3 dogs. Claire raises an eyebrow. What were you preparing for? Ethan looks back at the empty space beside the fireplace where 3 beds now wait. A family that had already lost enough. Later that afternoon, Ethan returns to Pine Ridge Animal Rescue. The 3 German Shepherds are waiting in the yard. Ranger approaches first. Sadie follows. Finn stays close behind. They move together like they always have. But this time, Ethan notices something different. They are not only watching each other. They are watching him too. The next morning, Ethan arrives at Pine Ridge Animal Rescue before the doors officially open. The parking lot is almost empty, covered with a thin layer of frost that shines beneath the early sunlight. He sits in his truck for a moment with both hands resting on the steering wheel. A year ago, he would have called this overthinking. Today, he understands it differently. Some decisions deserve silence before they deserve action. Inside the building, Claire is waiting with the final paperwork. But before any signatures are made, she leads Ethan to the exercise yard. Ranger, Sadie, and Finn are already outside. The moment the gate opens, Ranger looks up. Sadie notices. Finn notices Sadie noticing. Within seconds, all 3 are watching Ethan. Claire smiles softly. They know you now. Ethan steps into the yard. He does not call them. He simply stands still. Ranger walks forward first, but this time Sadie and Finn follow without hesitation. There is no panic. No searching. Just 3 dogs moving toward the same person at their own pace. Ethan kneels and lets them approach. Ranger rests his head against his shoulder. Sadie leans against his side. Finn circles once before settling near his boots. For a moment, the yard feels completely quiet. The kind of quiet Ethan used to avoid. The kind that once reminded him of empty rooms and unanswered questions. But now, surrounded by 3 German Shepherds, the silence feels different. It feels full. Claire watches from the gate. You know, she says, the family interested in Sadie decided not to move forward. Ethan looks up. He does not celebrate. He simply exhales. Are they okay? Claire nods. They are still waiting for the right home. Ethan looks at Sadie. The shepherd lifts her eyes toward him, then toward Ranger and Finn. Always checking. Always connected. Claire hands him the adoption agreement. Before you sign, I want you to understand something. There will be difficult days. 3 dogs means 3 personalities. Ranger may need extra care as he gets older. Finn may need patience. Sadie may always be the one making sure everyone is together. Ethan smiles slightly. Sounds like they already have jobs. Claire laughs quietly. Maybe they do. He reads every page carefully. There is no dramatic music. No perfect moment. Just a man making a serious promise. A promise that includes early mornings, unexpected expenses, and changing the shape of his life. When he finally signs, Claire takes the papers and places 3 temporary collars on the table. Ethan notices the small metal tags hanging from each one. 3 names. 3 identities. 3 stories that had somehow remained connected. Outside, Daniel arrives with the truck. He opens the back door and has already placed 3 blankets inside. Ethan looks surprised. You were prepared? Daniel shrugs. You were going to say yes eventually. Ethan shakes his head with a quiet laugh. The loading process is slow. Not because the dogs are afraid. Because each one waits for the others. Ranger steps up first, then pauses. Sadie follows. Finn waits until both are inside before joining them. No one gives a command. No one pulls a leash. They simply move when they are ready. On the drive home, Ethan checks the rearview mirror more than the road ahead. 3 German Shepherd faces look back at him. Ranger lies calmly in the middle. Sadie rests beside him. Finn watches the passing trees through the window. For the first time in years, Ethan is not returning to an empty house. When the truck turns onto his property, the porch light is already on. The house that once felt too quiet now waits with 3 beds beside the fireplace. Ethan opens the door. Ranger steps down. Sadie follows. Finn looks around, then waits. Ethan understands immediately. Finn is not asking if the house is safe. He is asking if everyone is coming with him. Ethan closes the truck door gently behind them. Nobody gets left behind here, he whispers. And for the first time, all 3 dogs walk toward the same doorway. The first night with 3 German Shepherds is quieter than Ethan expects. There is no chaos. No endless movement. No impossible moment that makes him question his decision. Instead, there is something much simpler. 3 dogs learning the sound of a new home. The fireplace glows softly against the living room walls. The scent of fresh blankets and warm coffee fills the air. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, carrying the cold night across the empty fields. Inside, Ranger lies closest to Ethan's chair. Sadie rests near the fireplace. Finn stays between them, exactly where he seems to believe he belongs. Ethan watches them for a long time. Years ago, he learned how to survive by staying prepared, by expecting change, by keeping emotions carefully controlled. But these 3 dogs are teaching him something different. Not every bond needs to be protected by distance. Some things are protected by showing up. The following weeks bring adjustments. Mornings begin earlier. The grocery list becomes longer. Ethan learns that 3 German Shepherds can create 3 completely different routines. Ranger prefers quiet mornings by the window. Sadie follows Ethan from room to room, always checking that everyone is nearby. Finn is curious about everything, from the sound of the mailbox opening to the strange machine that makes noise in the kitchen. The house changes slowly. The empty corners disappear. The silence becomes softer. One afternoon, Daniel visits and stands in the doorway, watching the dogs move around Ethan. You realize they adopted you too, right? He says. Ethan looks over. What makes you say that? Daniel points toward the living room. Ranger is sleeping peacefully. Sadie is watching Ethan. Finn is carrying a toy toward him, waiting for attention. Because you are not the only one who changed your life. Ethan does not answer immediately. He understands. Before them, his home was organized around what he needed. Now, every decision includes 4 hearts instead of 1. A few months later, Pine Ridge Animal Rescue invites Ethan back for a small community event. He brings Ranger, Sadie, and Finn. The same place where he once stood uncertain now feels completely different. Claire watches the 3 shepherds walk beside him. They look happy, she says. Ethan smiles. They are. She looks at him carefully. And you? Ethan glances toward the dogs. Ranger notices him first. Sadie follows. Finn moves closer. 3 familiar faces. 3 reminders of a choice that was never only about adoption. I think I am learning how to be home too, he says. Claire does not respond with words. She simply smiles. Later that day, Ethan sits outside with the dogs while the sun lowers behind the trees. The yard is no longer just grass and fencing. It is a place filled with memories. Small moments. Morning walks. Quiet evenings. The sound of paws moving across the floor. He thinks about the day he first entered the shelter believing he had to choose one dog. He remembers standing there, trying to decide which life fit best into his own. But the truth had been waiting in front of him the entire time. Some connections are not created because we choose them. Some are revealed because we finally stop looking away. Ranger places his head beside Ethan's hand. Sadie settles nearby. Finn stretches out in the warm sunlight. Ethan looks at the 3 German shepherds and feels a peace he has not known in years. The world outside continues moving. Seasons change. Days pass. But inside that small home beyond the edge of town, something remains constant. 3 dogs found a person who would not separate them. And 1 person found a family he never expected. Sometimes, the greatest rescue is not about saving a life. Sometimes, it is about allowing 4 souls to find their way back to belonging.